So in this module, without going too deep down the rabbit hole of color science, we're going to get into Unreal's color output options, specifically the Unreal Tone Curve, Linear sRGB, and OCIO options. So OpenColor.io is a color management solution geared towards motion picture production with an emphasis on visual effects and animation. Those of you working in bigger productions may have a color space pipeline you need to conform to, and that is where OCIO comes in. With the OCIO integration into Unreal Engine, you can choose to output your renders to whatever color space you want, as well as preview it in the viewport. Whether that's Alexa Log C, Rec 709, or the industry standard ACES. Again, this is a very advanced topic that quickly goes beyond the scope of this course, and its usage varies on a per production basis. But together, we'll learn about how to set it up. This is likely something that most users will not need to use, but as always, knowledge is power. So first off, you're going to need to download an OCIO config, so we can find that on OCIO's official website, the link of which will be in the video description. And then, going on the Download tab up top, you'll find a Downloads section up here, and you can download sample OCIO configurations. Now, the one you download here is going to be entirely dependent on your production's needs, so bear in mind, this may be different depending on what you're working on. But for the sake of this course, sample OCIO configurations will be just fine. You download a zip file, and you'll be ready to go. Now, going back into Unreal, we're going to go make sure that we have the OCIO plugin enabled, so by going to Settings, Plugins, and we can search for OCIO. And in theory, you should have this enabled by default, but again, we're just covering our bases here, making sure that it's enabled, so that you don't run into any issues. So there's one thing we need to do here in the content browser, and that's create an OCIO config file. So this is going to be an asset that will be found in your project. We absolutely need to create this. So we're going to right-click in the content browser, go to Miscellaneous, and create OpenColor.io configuration. This will create a new asset here. And by double-clicking on it, we can open it. And you'll get a new window right here. What you need to do now is find a configuration file in the zip file that you just downloaded from the OCIO website. So we're going to click on the three dots here, and in the folder that we downloaded from the OCIO website, you'll find a series of other folders. Depending on your production, you might want to use Nuke Default, or in my case, I'm going to be using ACES 1.0.3. In either of these folders, you will find a config.ocio file, and that is what we need to load into Unreal. If done correctly, you should now have the config file path found right here. And now we need to designate which color spaces we want to use in our project. So in the desired color spaces here, I'm going to click on the little plus to add another one and another one. So the first one I'm going to choose is Utility Linear sRGB, because Unreal, when the tone curve is disabled, will output your renders in linear sRGB. That is the input. Next, a common one that filmmakers like to use is ARRI Alexa Log C. And the last one will be ACES CG, which is commonly used in the VFX industry. But again, you can add any color space you want. This is 100% going to depend on your production. There is no right or wrong answer to use here. In general, the only one that is pretty much always necessary is Utility Linear sRGB. The remaining others depend on your needs. So once we've set up our color spaces, we're going to hit the Save button and close this window. And now we're ready to display our color space changes in our viewport. So we're going to do that by clicking on the Lit button up top here. Go down to OCIO Display, Enable Display, select an OCIO asset, designate the configuration file that we just created. And now we need to set our input and output. The input is going to be Utility Linear sRGB, because like I said, when the tone curve is disabled in Unreal, Unreal will output a linear sRGB image. And the second one will be your output, and in this case, I'm going to set it to ARRI v3 log C. And you'll see right away that our image got much flatter, much less contrasty, and that is entirely normal. A log color space is a flat profile, and this is a very desirable color profile because it makes it so easy to color grade in post-production. So you can also change your output to ACES, and it is completely normal for it to look like this because ACES is a linear profile. In my case, I personally love to work in log C just because, like I said, that flat profile makes it much easier to color grade in post-production. So this is just a viewport transform. So if you want to render your frames with the movie render queue with this color space baked in, we can do that. So we're going to our sequencer, making sure we have our sequence loaded. Again, if you don't, go to Cinematics, load your sequence, or create a new level sequence. We're going to open up the movie render queue settings. We're going to open our movie render queue settings right here. And on the big green settings button up top here, we're going to click on it and add color output. In the color output tab here, you'll see we need to do exactly what we just did in the viewports. So where it says OCIO configuration is enabled, click on yes, unfold this tab here. And where it says configuration source, we're going to designate the configuration file that we created. Our source color space will be linear sRGB, and the destination color space will be REV3 log C, or whatever color space you want to render in. When rendering with OCIO configuration on, it will automatically disable the tone curve. So you don't need to set this. In fact, you can't set this. Once you've done this, hit the accept button, and you can hit render local. And you'll see right here in the render preview, we have our log color space applied to our render correctly. If, on the other hand, you don't want to export with a color space baked in, you don't need to. You can just uncheck this and disable the tone curve right here becomes available. With OCIO disabled and the tone curve disabled, Unreal will give you a linear sRGB render. This makes it very easy for colorists to use a color transform node to convert that to whatever color space they want in post-production. So again, this is a pretty advanced topic and will change depending on your production. So there's no real right or wrong way to do this. It all depends on your needs. So here we have our render. As we can see, the Alexa V3 log C profile has been baked into it and has given us a much softer, flatter profile. This makes it so easy to grade. This is extremely desirable for filmmakers and colorists alike. So we've only barely scratched the surface of how deep and complicated color science can be, but fortunately, the core principles of how to use OCIO in the Unreal Engine, along with the linear workflow, are pretty simple and easy to understand.